With the new league year finally upon us, the Washington Commanders entered Wednesday with one clear resolution in mind: to improve the run defense in 2025. They made two moves that could have helped that cause. We'll talk about that and more on this episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome everybody inside today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I am your host, David Harrison, here with you Monday through Friday, your friend, your eyes, your ears on the ground, covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Also chipping in with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team as well. And I want to thank you for coming through for today's episode of Locked On Commanders, in which we are going to talk about the Washington Commanders potentially losing their edge and their edges, their options to address the edge of their defensive line. We're going to talk about Deebo Samuel's deal going final and what else it might mean in the trickle-down effect of the free agent class. And we're going to start off talking about new NFL year beginning Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern time, the New Year's resolution I have for the Washington Commanders: improving their run defense in 2025. Every day, as those of you who come through for every episode, every single day, a special thank you to you for doing so and for coming through here. And if anybody out there is not already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to this episode right now. If you're new to the show, I want to welcome you. Thank you for finding us. Hopefully you enjoy. Hopefully you have a good time, and hopefully we see you back here very soon. This is Locked On Commanders, a daily podcast, your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. New Year's resolutions. That is a time-honored tradition of every new year. The new NFL year began. We are officially in the 2025 NFL season. So when we say last year, we're talking about 2024. When we say this year, we're talking about 2025. When we say next year, we're talking about 2026. So New Year's resolution for the Washington Commanders. Look, every team across the National Football League, everybody, always protect the quarterback. Always get better at protecting the quarterback. Unless you had zero pressures, zero hits, zero sacks, you need to get better at protecting the quarterback. So that's an everybody thing. Specifically to the Washington Commanders, though, improve the run defense. Do it by trading for players. Do it by adding players in free agency. Do it by drafting the right players. Do it by creating more cohesiveness, consistency, and coaching guys up again for another year. And do it by signing free agents. The Washington Commanders signed, or agreed to sign, I should say, 2 new free agents on Wednesday, the first day of the new league year. Both of them could potentially be aimed at helping this team get better in their run defense in 2025. The first move we're going to talk about agreeing to terms. Real quick, as we have done all this week with all these live episodes, these roster moves and the roster discussion we're going to have as of 8 p.m. Eastern time, Wednesday, March 12th. So any moves that happen after 8 p.m., unfortunately, I've gone in pre-production. They're not going to be a part of this episode. We will talk about them in the next episode. So continuing on here today, Jonathan Jones, cornerback, defensive lineman, Eddie Goldman. Those are the 2 players that the Washington Commanders agreed to terms with on Wednesday that I think are going to point to trying to get better a little bit in run defense. Now, Jonathan Jones obviously is not going to be, his primary role is not going to be a run defender. A cornerback is never going to be that guy, but you do want your cornerbacks, especially in today's NFL, to be able to tackle. So that's what, we talked about this before. A lot of Commanders people, a lot of Commanders fans kind of had their eyes on Asante Samuel Jr. I'm not telling you the Washington Commanders won't sign Asante Samuel Jr., just absolutely wouldn't be interested. However, his biggest weakness is his inability to tackle. And I understand, again, corners, that's not their first job. But when you get past their first job, you do want them to be able to do that, because as good as Asante Samuel is in coverage and as good as he has as a playmaker, potentially taking the ball away, if you're facing a team like, say, the Philadelphia Eagles, who are just going to run the ball at Asante Samuel Jr.'s direction 15 times a game, and that's a little bit hyperbolic. But if you're going to face a defense or an offense is going to do that to you, he also needs to be able to at least hold his own in that category. Not really known for doing that. So anything, let's get to Jonathan Jones. Turns 32 in September, so a little bit long in the tooth. We'll kind of get to that kind of motivation here later in this episode as well. Agreed to a 1-year deal, not a big surprise. Undrafted free agent originally in 2016 out of Auburn. Started with the Patriots, spent his entire career so far with the New England Patriots. He's got 71 career starts. He can play outside or he can play in the slot. Scheme versatile type of guy. Played 404 snaps according to Pro Football Focus on the outside last year for the New England Patriots. played 166 snaps inside for the New England Patriots. So again, scheme versatile. Doesn't necessarily mean Mikey Sainristil is moving back inside. Also doesn't mean he's going to stay outside. Provides optionality and scheme flexibility. What you really like about a guy like Jonathan Jones is he provides you the opportunity, right? Let's pretend, let's look at an offense that's got kind of a lopsided set here. You've got, multiple receivers on one side of the formation, and then maybe no receivers or a tight end, something like that on the other side of the formation. Mikey Sainristil is by himself on the other side. You can actually see the offense go into motion. Corners don't move because you basically move Mikey Sainristil from more of an inside alignment to an outside alignment, and the play call is the same. Vice versa with Jonathan Jones. Didn't grade out against the run all that great in 2024, Jonathan Jones, but he does have some solid marks there over the course of his career over the years. So, the question is that a sign of his age and a sign of his downward development, or is it a sign of just the New England Patriots kind of having a rough overall season in 2024? I think here the Washington Commanders probably leaning more towards it was just a byproduct of a tough season overall. His tackling grade, even if his run defense grade has kind of dipped down a little bit, tackling grade has been very consistent over the years as well. So could he be a starter in this current defense? I think, yeah, right now you would pencil him in as a starter in this current defense. Kayvon Seymour coming back to the Washington Commanders roster on Wednesday as well, or at least agreeing on a deal to come back to the roster. He's not a starter. So Mikey Sainristil, Marshawn Lattimore, Jonathan Jones, basically your top cornerbacks on this team as it stands right now. That could also obviously change. We'll see what happens. Noah Igbenogany, I don't think this necessarily precludes the team from bringing Noah back. I think it just basically gives them another option, potentially test out there as a slot defender or as a perimeter cornerback. How does this help the run defense? Well, historically, like I said, his ability to help against the run has been better than any Commanders corner was in 2024. His tackle stats are better, while his grade wasn't all that great. If you get deeper into the tackling percentages and tackling stats, his missed tackle percentage was 6.6%, much better than any other corner on the Washington roster last year. The best corner last year in missed tackle rate was Mikey Sainristil, 11.4%, almost twice as much percentage, twice as high a percentage, I should say, of missed tackles than Jonathan Jones. Now, that's overall tackling. That includes passes, right? That includes receivers trying to tackle receivers, things like that. So when you go to actual run plays, just run plays, so typically you're talking running backs, things like that, the missed tackle rate for Jonathan Jones does go up to 12.5%. But like I said, cornerbacks, that's not their primary responsibility, right? That ranked 16th in the NFL among NFL cornerbacks last year, who played as many run snaps as Jonathan Jones did, 285. So for relative to his peer group, actually a very good missed tackle rate, even though that 12.5% sounds very, very high. Again, we're talking about a cornerback. Now, Mikey Sainristil did have a better run play missed tackle percentage than Jonathan Jones. He was actually 12th among that same group of corners. So now you've got two corners in the top 16 in missed tackle rates against design run plays in your defense. So that's pretty good start to trying to improve your run defense from a second level standpoint. Still not a corner strong suit, but you like having the better ones. Now we move to Eddie Goldman. Goldman turned 31 in January, agreed to a one-year deal as well. Second round pick in 2015 out of Florida State, 83 career starts, opted out of the 2020 season due to COVID, retired after that, was out of the NFL in 2022 and 2023. So he was in 2021, retired, out for 2022 and 23, came back in 2024, played 10 games for the Atlanta Falcons. He's from DC, so this is a homecoming for him. My best little bit of a description for Eddie Goldman: this is a big dude, all right? 6'4", 332-pound gap eater. Run defense grades are not great, but you're not really asking him to make the play so much as you're asking him to eat up space, eat up blocks, and help other guys and set up other guys to make those plays, right? Perhaps a tush push contender, right? Like maybe he's just big enough to clog that hole there in the middle. Could he be a starter? No, I don't think he's going to be a starter role player. How does he help the run defense? Well, he's basically a younger Carl Davis. Remember defensive tackle Carl Davis, who was called up during the regular season from the practice squad. We asked Joe Witt Jr. about him. He said he's a big dude that knows how to stay north and south, knows how to stay lined up to the line of scrimmage, doesn't get pushed back, doesn't get pushed around. Now, we'll see if Carl Davis returns. Some people think the addition of Goldman actually means that Sheldon Day won't be back. I think Javon Kinlaw is more Sheldon Day than than Eddie Goldman is. So I think the Javon Kinlaw signing actually has more of an impact on Sheldon Day's status. I think this is more of a Carl Davis replacement, which means if that's the case, if Javon Kinlaw is not a Jonathan Allen replacement, he's a Sheldon Day replacement, and Eddie Goldman is a Carl Davis replacement, then you still need a replacement for Jonathan Allen, perhaps in the NFL draft. Several defensive tackles expected to go in the area of the Commanders' second-round pick. Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State is one that comes to mind. So, don't hate the move here. Depth guy is basically what I expect. I don't expect him to be one of your top two or even necessarily top three. I think he's a run package guy, special teams, obviously, trench guy, things like that. Big package, nose tackle type of dude. So those are the two additions that were made on Wednesday. However, coming out of the legal tampering open negotiating period of the National Football League, the Washington Commanders considered winners by two publications. We'll talk about why and why I agree with them coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode of Locked On Commanders brought to you in part by Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. Well, that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal chief financial officer, CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Monarch Money was kind enough to give me access to an account with Monarch Money. I've been using it all week long to get ready to tell you what I think about it. And I will tell you what it's really cool because it gives you a lot of information that you have at your fingertips anyway, right? But like this says, command center, it gives you all that information in one spot. So you don't have to go searching. Don't go searching through this bill, this app, this login, this whatever. It gives you all the stuff all in one place, all in a very convenient package. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Continuing now today's episode of Locked On Commanders, this live episode, first day of the new league year. Happy New Year, NFL fans, Commanders fans, everywhere. The Washington Commanders are already winning. They were deemed winners of the legal tampering open negotiating period. First 2 days, 2.5 days, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday up until 4 p.m. Eastern time. Now, PFF called them a winner, saying, quote, in a free agent class that lacked top-tier talent, an innovative approach was needed to acquire elite playmakers. Commanders general manager Adam Peters did just that, completing two marquee trades for Deebo Samuel and Laramie Tunsil, two of the highest-graded players to change teams this offseason, end quote. Yeah, look, I really like the moves that Adam Peters made in these trades. And I know that some people think that Deebo Samuel is washed. Some people think Laramie Tunsil is on his way down. And look, we're going to talk about the penalties. We're going to talk about some of the other things that have come up because Locked On Texans host Big Sarge had a lot of things to say about the public perception of Laramie Tunsil. So I will be sharing that with you all here later this week as we get to the end of this week and start to really kind of put a bow on everything that's happened here in the first week of the new NFL league year, because both of these guys, Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, both of them come in with a little bit of baggage, right? Both of them come in with the mark of maybe they're a little bit selfish. Maybe they're not the greatest team player. But I'll tell you right now, the biggest thing to do is to look at the reaction around the league, right? Deebo Samuel coming to Washington, you got a lot of people in San Francisco who are like, hey, bro, go be great. Hey, dude, go do, like, they don't have to say these things publicly, but they're doing it. Again, I always lean back to Adam Peters knows Deebo Samuel better than anybody watching this show or anybody talking on this show. Laramie Tunsil. Now, there's a little bit of an enigma, right? Didn't work with Adam Peters, all those things. But you look at what the media, and I'm not saying the entire media because I don't read everybody in Houston, but I trust our guys, Locked On Texans, on the ground with the Houston Texans and what they've talked about. Again, I'm going to share that all with you at the end of the season. I think you're going to be a little bit happier about that. And we'll talk about the penalties because penalties are singular, but they're also not singular. We'll get into all that later on this season. NFL.com calls Washington a winner as well, saying, quote, the Commanders are going all in while Jaden Daniels, the electric quarterback, is on his rookie contract. It probably shouldn't be a surprise that general manager Adam Peters swung a trade for a premier left tackle in Laramie Tunsil. Peters was in San Francisco's front office when the 49ers traded for Trent Williams. That's a big talent upgrade and was the trade to acquire wide receiver Deebo Samuel from the 49ers, end quote. So I really like going back to the Trent Williams trade, right? We talked about this. There's no guarantee that just because Trent Williams is about to turn 37 and is still one of the best, if not the best, left tackles in the National Football League, that Laramie Tunsil, who is about 5 years off that path, is going to be the same. But there is now evidence, there's a precedent to think that perhaps Laramie Tunsil, who's coming off of 3 straight Pro Bowl seasons coming into 2025, could stay on that path. So again, reason to be optimistic, all of these things. Going all in, I think that's a really good phrase. The phrase all in, was kind of made a mockery by the Dallas Cowboys last year. I get it, but it's still a very good phrase. And I think it's really important to put everything into context. So insider Mark texted me today and told me, this is Mark saying, I feel like the Commanders are going after older veterans, showing this is a Super Bowl year, not building for the next 2 to 3 years. And I certainly think there's some truth there. Right? I think there's certainly a grain of truth there. But I think what they're doing, honestly, is very balanced. They're building for this year. Absolutely. They're going all in, all that stuff. But they're also building that long-term flexibility. Deebo Samuel, Laramie Tunsil, absolutely win now moves, right? But both guys could be. Don't necessarily have to be, right? Deebo Samuel, he's got 1 year left on his deal. If it doesn't work or if it's not working, he walks away. The great thing about that is we talked about compensatory picks yesterday, right? He walks away as an unrestricted free agent. And, there's a possibility here that he has a really good season, shows a lot of that talent, but the Commanders are still like, okay, we appreciate it, but we're not going to stay here. Deebo Samuel goes somewhere else, gets a nice contract, and the Commanders maybe get put in line to get some compensatory picks the next year. Laramie Tunsil, he's got 2 years left on his deal. Now, the word on the street is he wants an extension, but look, just because you want an extension doesn't mean you're necessarily going to get an extension, all of these things, and you got to play it out to see what's going to happen. So they're absolutely win now moves, but if they work out, and if they prove to be guys that are better locker room presences than maybe the I would say the national football watching community, right? This is more of a fan fringe media type of observation from what I've seen than it is a beat reporter and teammate observation. Then you can potentially sign these guys to longer term deals and you become a part of your total Washington Commanders retooling is what Dan Quinn and Adam Peters like to call it. Other veterans like Jonathan Jones, Eddie Goldman, they're guys who are going to fill in the depth chart right now so the team isn't in a position where they have to reach for a player, right? That's the key. Optionality. We talked about this with Adam Peters a lot last year. Optionality. You want to have the ability to go into the NFL draft and not have every other team in the NFL say you have to go this direction, right? But the team is still very possibly still going to draft guys at corner, still very much possibly going to draft a defensive tackle, right? All these things are still on the board, and then groom them to either replace them next year, the year after that, or replace them this year. We saw that with Tyler Owens, not a draft pick, right? But we saw Tyler Owens come in, and the plan was to groom him to eventually become part of the safety rotation. Well, it happened a lot faster than they expected it to, and the person that really bit the bullet on that one was Defo, Derek Forrest, who ends up with the Buffalo Bills, agreed to a deal with them on Wednesday. So, that can happen a lot faster. So a guy like Jonathan Jones, guy like Eddie Goldman, while there is an envisioned role for them today, that role may change if somebody comes in and is able to impact that decision-making process. So in that sense, you're making moves to be more competitive now without selling off completely your chances for building success down the road. Now, are the Washington Commanders losing their edge or their edges? That is the final part of our conversation coming up on this live episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. March is here, which means March Madness is here, and FanDuel is going to give you the chance to get in on the action like never before, because right now new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who is going to cut down the nets. Let's look at some current odds on FanDuel right now. The Duke Blue Devils men's team plus 330 favorites to win the men's college basketball championship in 2025. Auburn coming in second with plus 380 odds, while Florida comes in third with plus 750 odds. In the NCAA women's bracket, UConn is plus 290 favorites. South Carolina tied with UConn at plus 290. UCLA third at plus 550. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. No waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Wrapping up this live episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast, we're going to get into whether or not the Washington Commanders are losing their edge. But like I told you all, we're going live here. The roster moves that we're talking about happen as of 8 p.m. Eastern time. Well, thanks to one of the commenters in the live YouTube chat, I was monitoring that while that last ad was going. And Dietrich Wise is coming to the Washington Commanders, according to Adam Schefter. And I don't even have to do a lot of research. Just tell you right here on this episode, again, run defense. That is the aim that we're trying. That is the New Year's resolution. We're trying to improve run defense for the Washington Commanders. So we'll get into more on what Wise brings to the Washington Commanders on our end of week episode, the next episode. So make sure you come back for that. But let's talk about the edge here. Losing the edge. Look, it started off a lot of excitement, right? Could be Myles Garrett, could be Trey Hendrickson, could be Josh Sweat, could be Joey Bosa. Today we woke up on Wednesday. I was like, well, maybe it could be DeMarcus Lawrence. Well, DeMarcus Lawrence is going to the Seattle Seahawks, and that's not going to be him. So who are the top edges? And again, this is as of 8 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. Azeez Ojulari from the New York Giants, Dante Fowler from the Washington Commanders, Charles Omenihu from the Kansas City Chiefs, Zadarius Smith, veteran that was released by the Detroit Lions, Von Miller, another veteran that was released by the Buffalo Bills, or the NFL draft. You know what I mean? Now, my assumption here is that you're going to at least get a veteran brought in. Maybe it's Dante Fowler coming back. Again, we kind of talked about earlier this week about some of the dramatics that are kind of surrounding that situation. So maybe not. Again, Azeez Ojulari is a guy that I've always kind of thought was a little bit underrated. Not saying he's going to be a franchise edge setter for the entirety of his career or anything like that, but still, I think a very capable guy. Zadarius Smith, was still a very good pocket pusher in his last season with the Detroit Lions. Wouldn't hate seeing him come over on a one-year deal. And then you can still go in the draft, get a younger guy out there to start developing behind them. So, still some options out there. Again, not the greatest options. But then, of course, I had one insider say, look, with all these edges going off the board, are we just to assume that Adam Peters is like, forget it, I'm just going to go in the draft. First pick, number 29, second pick, number 61, whatever. Like, I'll just go get edge rushers in the NFL draft. I said, well, don't forget, Trey Hendrickson is not off the board. There's been a lot of quiet, around him. There hasn't been a lot of smoke billowing up around him, but he's still there. And the Washington Commanders still have the draft capital they would need to execute that trade. Now, I know a lot of people would hate to see the Washington Commanders give up even more draft capital to get a guy, get a guy in his 30s. But I'm just putting it out there that is still potentially on the table here. So the Washington Commanders still have some edge rusher options. I know that the options are dwindling, and that certainly is frustrating to some people, but we just got to bide our time and see what the Washington Commanders end up doing there. Also finalized their trade for Deebo Samuel. That was confirmed on Wednesday, right at 4 p.m., right at the date or the time of the new league year. When the team finally did confirm publicly 2025 fifth-round pick to San Francisco. The Laramie Tunsil trade is still technically pending a physical. So that trade hopefully will be done by the end of the week, maybe into Saturday. So with compensatory picks being awarded this week, we talked about comp picks specifically yesterday. The Commanders currently own picks number 29, 61, 79, 205, 236, and 245 in the upcoming NFL draft. However, once the Laramie Tunsil trade is complete, Washington will give numbers 79 and 236, a third rounder and a seventh rounder to the Houston Texans. They'll get back number 128 in the fourth round. So that Tunsil trade value chart, their trade chart value, according to the Rich Hill value chart calculations, basically the Houston Texans got a late second round value for Laramie Tunsil. So see if you agree with that or not. A couple of other notes before we get out of here. Wide receiver Cooper Kupp released by the Los Angeles Rams. If you're an everydayer, you already know I was not on board with the Washington Commanders potentially trading for the receiver. However, as a free agent, 1 year, low number, you know what I mean? Low guarantees, maybe no guarantees, a lot of incentives, things like that. Wouldn't necessarily hate it. You know what I mean? 6'2" guy, certainly still has some ability, just not worth what he was going to be coming with had the team traded for him. So as a free agent, don't necessarily hate that. Noah Brown, Olamide Zaccheaus is still out there. Wouldn't hate seeing either of those guys back either. I know a lot of people are talking about safety Justin Simmons coming in. Justin Simmons, free safety, would play next to Will Harris as a strong safety, potentially compete with Quan Martin for starting reps, all those things. Look, without turning on the full tape, I will tell you, obviously, Justin Simmons, the more established guy. But according to PFF, Quan Martin was pretty much better in every area. He didn't blow him out of the water by any means, but very solid run defender, very solid deep safety who can also come up into the box. Really like Quan a lot back there. I know he didn't make a lot of splash plays last year, but there's something to be said about a guy that doesn't give up a lot of splash plays. and the Washington Commanders were one of the better teams in not giving up deep ball passes in the 2024 season. Part of that, obviously, is because of Quan Martin. The Washington Commanders re-signed quarterback, or agreed to re-sign quarterback Marcus Mariota. I absolutely love that move. I know a lot of people were talking about him potentially leaving, seeing what would happen with Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, and Kirk Cousins, and then maybe Marcus goes somewhere else. So I absolutely love that Marcus is coming back. Can't wait to see him again when that time comes. They did lose a couple of players, though, the Washington Commanders, or a few players. Michael Walker, linebacker, goes to the Arizona Cardinals. Derek Forrest, safety, goes to the Buffalo Bills. Benjamin St. Juste, cornerback, goes to the Los Angeles Chargers. Michael Walker was the only one that we had really been talking about potentially coming back to the Washington Commanders. Derek Forrest, not expected him to come back. Benjamin St. Juste also did not expect him to come back. We do have a little bit of time, so let's come through the live chat here. And like I said, I already saw one. WGM3 dropped the Dietrich Wise Jr. news for us, so I appreciate that. Got a question here from Archie's. I heard people talking about turning the defensive line into something like the Seahawks' old defense. That's why they got the defensive lineman they picked up. What about that? Honestly, I'd have to go back and fully study the old. I think you're talking about the Legion of Boom defensive line. I will tell you, I remember some guys in there. They had some big guys in the middle. Obviously, you love having some of those big guys in the middle. You love having longer guys. Michael Bennett was out there for a long time. The padless wonder, all those things. Look, I think at the end of the day, what you want is you want to have run stop ability. You want to have pass rush ability. Johnny Newton is supposed to kind of bring you that pass rush ability from the interior defensive line. Again, we got to see how he develops. Deron Payne's supposed to be able to do a little bit of it both. But as we've seen since he's gotten paid, how much it's really shown up is kind of up to debate. Dorrance Armstrong Jr. was a solid edge last year, right? Not great, but not terrible. You would like to see the production kind of pick up a little bit more, but certainly was impactful. And then, right now the other edge is completely vacant. So as of right now, I would be better than what they've got on that other side of the edge because we got nobody. League Commander says, I'm glad we re-signed Marcus Mariota. Yep, absolutely. Robbie wants to know, do you think it's close to running it back with the amount of free agents coming back? I don't think we're quite to running it back scenario. Right? I think if you get like 5 or 6 more, remember the Commanders are not even to 60 players on their roster right now with the teams, with the deals that they've agreed to. So still a lot of work to be done for this Washington Commanders roster, but you're seeing a good amount of 1-year contracts starting to come in. So again, last year they replaced 60-something% of the active roster from 2024 opening day or 2023 opening day to 2024 opening day, replaced about 60% of the active roster. I think this year you're probably going to see about a 40% turnover on the active roster. And then the hope, right, is that you're putting people in place, and the following year, 30%. Following year, maybe it's like 25%. I think typically you're sitting around 15% every single year with rookies coming in and everything like that. A lot of talk about Marshawn Lattimore, hoping to see a lot more from him this year. Yeah, look, there's a belief from some people that Marshawn Lattimore was expected to come in and just be this all-pro caliber, Pro Bowl caliber corner from Jump Street, right? I've said it on this show, so if you're an everydayer going back to when that trade happened, I told you don't expect to see Marshawn Lattimore on the field. I said pretty early on in the process that post-bye was probably the earliest I would expect him back. And I'll tell you, like, there were a lot of fans who said that's ridiculous. And I'll tell you, there were some media members that said that too. They were like, nah, dude, there's no way. Well, that's exactly when he ended up playing. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, right? But very, very from the jump of trading for this player, right? Like Adam Peters made it very clear that yes, you want to get something from him now. You would love that. But this is about building this team for the future as well. Marshawn Lattimore getting his offseason, getting his body right again, getting to study the playbook, getting to come in here for the mini camps, for the OTAs, for a full training camp. You should see a much better version of Marshawn Lattimore than we saw last year. And if you didn't, again, there's a reason the Washington Commanders haven't given him a contract extension just because they traded for him. And if you need to cut ties, we go back to Adam Peters' history of the San Francisco 49ers. They made that trade. They moved up. They got Trey Lance. It didn't work out. They got egg on their face, but guess what they did? They wiped that egg off their face. They threw it away, and they said, moving on. That's the best thing you can do, right? The worst thing you can do with a bad decision is continue to try to make the bad decision a good decision. Understand what's a bad decision, move on from it. If Marshawn Lattimore shows that trade was a bad decision through the 2025 season, the Washington Commanders will move on from him. I'm confident in that. So again, we got some good things going on. We got some good things to talk about to wrap up the week as we get to our Friday episode. So make sure you come back through for that. In the meantime, if you got questions or comments, all you gotta do is text me. To do that, Become a Locked On Commanders insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Not only can you text me your thoughts, your questions in real time, you're going to get text from me with all the information I can give you, the updates I can give you, trying to keep up with some of these signings. And I'll tell you what, it is a busy time. And I actually missed DeMarcus Lawrence. One of my insiders had to bring me DeMarcus Lawrence. It was about 2 hours late on that because of everything going on. That one just slipped through the net a little bit. Either way, thank you for coming through. Make sure the Locked On NFL Draft podcast is your next listen or view. Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez are locking you down for the NFL Draft. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through every single day. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I'll see you back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.